highlights from a New York Times book review of Luis Elizondo's new book, Imminent. An 11-page reference guide to UAPs was published by the Major Cities Chiefs Association, which is the professional organization of major executives representing the largest cities in the United States and Canada, defeating the Draconian Empire and cooperating with the Galactic Federation. An interview with George Kavassilas. The Shroud of Turin has been confirmed as genuine. Does this mean the deep state's fake second coming is about to be unveiled? These stories and more on Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to the August 24 edition of Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review. We've got some very fascinating stories for you, and definitely things are heating up. There is major developments, more disclosures are coming, books and organizations are getting ready for some big revelations that are about to be made. So let's begin with this New York Times book review of Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent. Now, Luis Elizondo, in case you didn't know, he is the first person to head up an organization called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program that was set up by the Pentagon sometime around 2007, 2008, and he eventually resigned from his position in the Pentagon because he believed that the UFO or UAP threat was not being taken seriously. So this review says some very interesting, brings out some very important points about Elizondo's book, Imminent, which really is something that is going to be studied by a lot of academics. So it's worth our while to take a close look at, well, what are Elizondo's main contentions? Where's he coming from? What does he represent? So I thought this review was helpful in bringing out some of the major points. So here's the first one. Elizondo asserted that a decades-long UFO crash retrieval program has been operating as a super-secret umbrella group made up of government officials working with the defense and aerospace contractors. Over the years, he wrote, technology and biological remains of non-human origin have been retrieved from these crashes. So this is quite a big revelation. I mean, if we take the perspective of people working in academia or working in professional organizations that have not been taking the UFO issue seriously, something like this is a big deal. It's like here you got a former senior Pentagon official who worked for the, I believe it was the Undersecretary for Defense and Intelligence in the Pentagon. He's saying that they've been recovering UFO technology and the biological remains of the pilots, and that these are being studied by a secret umbrella group. So right there, you've got something that's going to pique the interest, get the interest of a lot of professionals. And I don't think this is by accident. I believe that what we are in the midst of is a big shift. In 1952, 1953, you had this study conducted by a prominent astronomer, I believe it was Hugh Robinson, and this panel that he was convening that was sponsored by the CIA actually produced a report called the Durant Report, and that report essentially said that the UFO issue was something that was going to be manipulated by America's allies, America's enemies. And so the best way to deal with UFOs, flying saucers, was to ridicule it. And they began an education program to ridicule the phenomenon so that anyone studying it, especially professionals, studying the UFO flying saucer phenomenon would be ridiculed and essentially driven out of any position of authority. And that began in the 1950s. So now fast forward to 2017, where we're talking 60 years later, you have a new position being rolled out by the deep state. I mean, the CIA sponsored the Robinson panel, and in 2017, you had two articles coming out, one in the New York Times, one in Politico, and that was the article that revealed the existence of the ATIP program, headed by Elizondo, and said that the Pentagon had been studying UFOs secretly for decades after Project Blue Book had come to an end, because in 1969, Project Blue Book officially ended because there was a report, the Condon report, which said that the UFO issue, there was nothing to it. It was not a national security issue. And so it was best to just ignore it and ridicule anyone proposing it. So that's been the position up until 2017. And now in 2017, you have a reversal, a new position that's been adopted. And that is that, well, UFOs are a national security threat after all. So after 60 years of saying that UFOs are not a national security threat, now they are a national security threat and they need to be studied. And lo and behold, Luis Elizondo, the first head of the ATIP program, he's saying, well, he had to leave the Pentagon because the Pentagon wasn't taking the UFO threat seriously. I mean, for those of you that are familiar with the exopolitics literature, that is so ridiculous, because we know that the UFO issue has been taken seriously from the beginning. I mean, you have a letter by a Canadian researcher, Wilbert Smith, to the Minister for the Canadian Department of Transportation, that Smith had done research in the Washington, D.C. area, and he had found that the UFO issue was the most highly classified issue in the United States national security apparatus, even higher than the hydrogen bomb. So the idea that somehow UFOs are not being taken seriously by the national security state is a joke, but that's apparently what Elizondo says, that he left. So I'll talk more about that later. So here's the second issue. In the book, he expressed alarm over the potential danger to humanity posed by the existence of technology that he said far exceeds what the United States or other countries have or can explain. So again, this is the national security threat narrative, that UFOs, because of the advanced technologies and the flight behavior and capabilities, this is something that far exceeds anything that is known to exist in the US military arsenal. Well, of course, if we look at what is publicly known, that is absolutely correct. But we know, those of you who have read my Secret Space Program book series, know that the US has not just one, not just two, not even three, but actually 4 secret space programs. I mean, you got one by the Air Force, one by the Navy, one that is run by the CIA and the National Reconnaissance Office, and another one that's actually run by NASA. So you've got 4 secret space programs, each of them with anti-gravity technologies far exceeding anything that is conventionally available. So the idea that these UFOs have technology that far exceeds the US. I mean, Luis Elizondo is definitely not in the loop on this. So the third point, the craft and the non-human intelligence controlling them present at best a very serious national security issue, and at worst, the possibility of an existential threat to humanity. So again, just playing up the threat scenario. So again, just put this in context. After 50 years of saying UFOs are no big deal, they're a joke, ridicule them, laugh, ha, ha. anyone taking these UFOs seriously is doesn't deserve to be in academia, doesn't deserve to be a professional. Now all of a sudden the narrative has switched. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, they're a serious national security concern and the possibility of an existential threat. So I mean, there's a design, there's an agenda here for why all of a sudden the UFO issue is being presented as a threat. And 4, frustrated by what he described as internal opposition and a lack of resources to deal with what he felt was a serious national security threat, Elizondo resigned and decided to bring his concerns to the broader intelligence community, Congress, and the public. Okay, so let's just take Luis Elizondo on face value that he was a mid-level bureaucrat within the Pentagon, and he was interested in UFOs, and he wasn't in the loop on these other projects that I've been talking about. He knew a little bit about some of these craft that had crashed and were being studied, but overall he thought that these were a threat and they weren't being taken seriously by the Pentagon. So, if we accept him on face value, then and him resigning from the Pentagon because he felt that the UFO threat or the national security aspect of the UFOs was not being taken seriously and he wanted to bring attention to it, then we can say, well, as many people believe that, okay, maybe he's a hero. Some will say he's a hero for giving up his position. But I think we need to kind of look at the big picture, which is that, he is really putting out a very limited narrative. And that's what I go on to say here, that at best, this is just a limited hangout. The information he's putting out in his book, based on this New York Times review, and I haven't read his book yet, it is really a limited hangout because we know that there are, as I said, at least 4 secret space programs in the United States. And we can go back to the revelations of William Tompkins, who said that it was during the Second World War that these secret space programs began due to the knowledge of Nazi Germany developing their own space program in Antarctica. Now, here's a really fascinating story, and this is an 11-page reference guide to UFOs, UAPs, from the Major Cities Chiefs Association, which is, quote, a professional organization of police executives representing the largest cities in the United States and Canada. So this is an 11-page document, and so there's 11 kind of points. So let me just move over to the document itself. Okay, so here's the document. So you can get this by going to the website belonging to the Major Cities Chiefs Association. So here's an 11-page guide that they have issued, and this is dated June 24, so it's just very, very recently, and it's a reference guide. So they're basically giving police chiefs in the biggest cities in the United States and Canada guidance on how to deal with the UFO phenomenon. And it is pretty detailed. You can go to the website and take a look at it, but Section 1, UAP in the news. So they're just covering UAP reports in the news in the first section. Section 2, they deal with law enforcement considerations, unknown threat to public safety, aviation safety, UAP related calls for service. So no reporting mechanism. So they are bringing up the law enforcement aspects of the UFO phenomenon. Number 3, Section 3, US government UAP programs. So they discuss, they give a review, starting from Project Saucer, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book, and the Brookings Report. And from the year 2000s to the present, they're talking about the OSAP, That's the predecessor to the ATIP program, ATIP, of course. Then there's the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force that was established in 2021 by the US Navy. And then you have the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the ARROW office, which continues to exist. So they're introducing police chiefs to the major UFO organizations or US government programs that existed historically and exist today. In other words, UFOs are a serious topic, and the federal government has an office to study these. Section 4, whistleblowers. So here they're introducing police chiefs to different whistleblower reports. Ryan Graves, who talks about pilot sightings. You have the US congressional hearing on UAPs, where you had Ryan Graves, David Fravor, and David Grush talking about their experiences with the UFO phenomenon. Of course, the David Grush testimony kind of stole the day because he was talking about crashed UFOs being recovered, being taken to facilities, corporate facilities, military facilities to be studied and reverse engineered, and also the pilots. The pilots were recovered, and that these involved non-human intelligence. Former Pentagon officials. So they're introducing police to different whistleblower reports. The UAP and Congress. So like going through some of the recent congressional initiatives to deal with the UFO phenomenon. So they give a review of that. Section 6, UAP and the US Department of Defense. They talk about the ARROW office, and they talk about the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force that was created by the Navy. They give a rundown of the different reports. So this is a really comprehensive document. Each page has a wealth of sources for them to follow. So I won't go on. I think there's already, you can see that this is a very serious initiative to get police chiefs in all the major cities to get a basic briefing on the UFO phenomenon so that they can brief their subordinates and get police ready for what's to come. So I think this document is another sign that there are going to be some pretty major developments, pretty major UFO disclosures coming our way, and that the police are getting ready for it, and so we should be as well. Okay, here's a interview I did with Indigo Angel, and she's talking about remembering Galactic and early Earth history. So she's a contactee. Her birth name is Amanda DiMarco, and she's been having experiences with angelic beings since the age of 3. She also had experiences with entities or grey beings involved in abductions that tried to stop her awakening. And she talks about the role of different extraterrestrial groups in subjugating humanity. So she's an experiencer. She's familiar with inner Earth crystal cities and the frequency grid surrounding our planet. I think that's very important, that we get used to the idea that the planet Earth is not just, rock and oceans that are randomly distributed, that there's a design to the distribution of everything on our planet, and that's due to a frequency grid surrounding it. And that this frequency grid is a target because the stability of the planet and the stability of the human civilizations that are established on this planet are going to be influenced by how well this frequency grid is handled. So if you degrade or destabilize the frequency grid, then terrible things can happen. If you stabilize it and make sure that it's harmonious, then surface civilizations can continue to evolve harmoniously. So she talks about the importance of light workers and starseeds traveling to different planetary grid points to cleanse these of dark energy. So this sort of thing's been going on for decades. When I began 20 years ago, or over 20 years ago now, studying this, I mean, there were already people doing this. I mean, there were people like Cryon and many others that were going to different energy or sacred spots to kind of like have conventions, but they would bring in positive energies to clear these key nodal points in the frequency grid. So that's been going on for a long time, and so Indigo Angel is continuing to do that, and she certainly has a fascinating perspective on the importance of cleaning the planetary energy grid and galactic and Earth history. So I'm announcing my new live webinar series that I'm calling the Exopolitics Monthly Live Briefing. So that's going to be done on a monthly basis, and I'm going to be covering topical exopolitics issues, upcoming interviews, and give you teasers of some of the most recent information that I've received. And so you can find out more about that by just going to my website, exopolitics.org. I have there a page, monthly live briefing, and so there's the links there for you to be able to register for this. The first one will be on September 7. This is a great way for you to get to hear of some of the things that have been happening behind the scenes, what is likely to happen in the near future, and get a chance to actually ask me questions in an expanded Q&A. So it'll be a 1-hour presentation done informally, where I'll be here in front of my bookshelf, just giving you the information in an informal way. And then there'll be a 1-hour Q&A where we can discuss many issues. So again, just go to my website, exopolitics.org. There'll be an article there on the monthly live briefing, and you will have the links there for how to register. Just click that link, and once you're there, it'll walk you through the process. Here's a tweet by an alternative researcher by the name of Ariel, and he gave a shout out to my YouTube channel and to the JP update. So I appreciate that. And he's recommending his followers to take a look at JP's information about portals, space missions, stargates, underground civilizations, cryptoids, Nordic extraterrestrials, etc. The spectrum of topics that JP has been discussing in his updates with me over the last few years now. So yes, it's great when these alternative researchers suddenly realize the significance of JP's revelations, because he currently is active duty US Army, and this is unprecedented that someone like that is allowed to talk about these missions, these covert missions. And typically, they're very highly classified, but he's been given the green light to talk about these types of missions. So definitely take a look at Ariel's Twitter channel. He definitely has his finger on the pulse of a lot of issues. So here's another review of Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent, and that was released on August 20. This is by Christopher Sharp from the Liberation Times. And he's making the point that many professionals are going to be paying attention to the UFO phenomenon due to this book. So in that sense, I agree that Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent, is going to play a very similar role to this earlier book released in 1997 by Colonel Philip Corso, The Day After Roswell. And Elizondo, in his book, another point he makes is that humanity is heading for a technological point of no return, and this is going to precipitate UFO disclosure in some form. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Of course, Elizondo goes on to say that UFOs are a danger, national security threat. Already talked about that. I suspect that Luis Elizondo was simply out of the loop. While he was a Pentagon official, he was a mid-level official, and he just didn't have the classification to know about these many of these programs. I mean, while he was familiar on some aspects of these UFO crash retrieval programs, he knew that they existed. He didn't know the full scope of those. I thought it was very interesting that Elizondo discusses in the book Imminent different Nordic extraterrestrials creating greys as workers. Now, he obviously offers that as a hypothesis, but I thought that was very interesting that he is speculating about greys working as a subservient worker race underneath Nordic extraterrestrials. So he's introducing two major groups of extraterrestrials that many people have interacted with over the years. On the one hand, the Nordics played up as very positive. On the other hand, the greys are very enigmatic. Some see them as friendly, leading to kind of like raising human awareness and consciousness. Others see them as a threat. Now, in this sense, the Elizondo saying that the Nordic ETs are creating greys as workers, I mean, you have to say, well, what's the agenda behind that? Is that to kind of like make it appear that greys and Nordics both share the same kind of like goals and agenda because the greys are involved in abductions? Does that mean that the Nordics also are involved in these abductions where you have humans being subjected to genetic experiments? So I think that this is very suspicious, but it's interesting that he talks about that. I think that maybe he has limited information, so I believe that while he was exposed to some information, while he was working in the Pentagon on the UAP topic, the information he was given was very limited in scope to just give him some idea of what's going on, to make him believe that the UFOs were a threat. And you have these groups like the Nordics creating the greys who are performing all these abductions and the genetic experiments. So therefore, thereby kind of tainting all the ET groups in the one sweep, which I think is very suspicious because we know that there are many different grey extraterrestrial groups. Some of them are negative, some of them are positive, and that the Nordics are the same. Most of them are benign and benevolent, but some are part of a negative agenda as well. Right, so here's the announcement about the fall semester of courses for the Exopolitics Institute. Every semester, we're talking 3 semesters a year, the Exopolitics Institute offers several courses, and so these courses are a great way to prepare for the coming global disclosures of extraterrestrial life. Each course is conducted by qualified instructors, and so here you have, for example, some of the courses: Introduction to Exopolitics, the first course; second course, Best Witness Testimony; another course, The Science, Politics and Spirituality of ET Civilizations. I've actually taught that course in the past, as well as the first one, Introduction to Exopolitics. And the syllabus is very similar to when I taught it. Now it's being taught by Manuel Lemeroy, who's spent well over 2 decades doing research on these topics. The fourth course, The Role of Hollywood and the Media in the Disclosure, that's conducted by Paola Harris, who's also spent, she's been working on the extraterrestrial issue since the 1970s, so over 50 years of experience. She also teaches Message from Space, Past and Present, and then there's a new course, Xenomethodology. So those are some of the courses that are taught in the Exopolitics Institute, which is a 501c3, and you can register by just following the link in the my Twitter feed. Here's a interview I did with George Kavassilas, defeating the Draconian Empire and cooperating with the Galactic Federation. So in this interview, George shared a very interesting interaction he had with a reptilian on the moon who was running affairs on the moon, that he described this incident happening, I think it was around 2014, that he was abducted and taken to the moon by grey-looking beings, but they had a green tint to them. So he was taken to the moon and they tried to control him, and then when he broke free of their control, he was able to identify a Draco-reptilian as the being pulling all the shots. And so he was able to go over and interact with this Draco-reptilian. So I won't kind of like give you a spoiler on what actually happened. I think it's worth going and listening to this interview. But I think he gives some very important insights into the Draconian Empire, how it can be defeated, and also cooperating with the Galactic Federation. He talks about the role the Galactic Federation is playing in cleaning up our planet. And so that is very, very helpful in identifying some of the major organizations that are interacting with the Earth and, of course, what's been happening on the moon. So, yeah, you can just go and watch that. Just go to exopolitics.org and you can watch that. Here's a story about the Shroud of Turin being confirmed as authentic. Now, when I heard this story, and here you have a very prominent poster on X, Jack Posovic, saying that a new Italian X-ray study of the Shroud of Turin confirms it dates back to 2,000 years. So the Shroud of Turin is genuine, okay? And most people accept that the Shroud of Turin was the shroud or cloth that was wrapped around the crucified Jesus. Now that it's been confirmed as authentic, now the question is, will the deep state roll out its fake second coming using a cloned version of Jesus? So why do I say that? Well, I say that because I did an interview with Stuart Swerdlow 2 years ago now, and he was part of the Montauk Project, and he was sent back in time to extract some of the DNA of Jesus, and he talks about what that DNA was used for. So let me play you a clip or a segment from that interview I did with Stuart Swerdlow 2 years ago, where he talks about him being part of the Montauk Project and being taken back in time. So I'll play that for you now.
Is that I was sent back to the time of Christ, and I was sent back with a gun, and I was told to shoot him. And I remember walking to the base of this huge building with stone steps going all the way up. And there at the top of the platform, I don't know what you would call it, was the Christ person. And he looked at me and I looked at him. And it's like I knew he knew why I was there. And I ran away. And I was brought back. And I was severely punished for not accomplishing that mission. Then, about a year after that, I was sent back to the time when he was on the cross. And I was given a medical kit, and I was told to extract blood from his toe while he was on the cross. And I did that. And I brought it back. After that, they sent me to the underground of Mars, where I was supposed to give the vial to the person who was there, because they were creating a clone of Christ that was going to be used as the second coming at an appropriate time in the future.
So there you have it. I mean, very, very controversial. I mean, this is something that I'm sure is going to upset a lot of people. But here you have Stuart Swerdlow, who was part of the Montauk Project, where children were used in these classified programs where they would go through space-time portals to gather information or to conduct missions. And so here he is talking about a time travel experiment where some of Jesus' DNA was extracted from his crucified body, and that they're going to use, they created a clone out of that. So now that gives us context for the Shroud of Turin. Why now? Why is the Shroud of Turin being confirmed as genuine now? Because someone that looks very much like this, that has the DNA that can be extracted from the Shroud of Turin, is going to appear in some kind of contrived second coming. Stuart Swerdlow was told that years or decades ago, and so now we've reached that point in time where this can happen. And of course this is controversial because many Christian evangelicals are waiting for the second coming of Jesus. So you can see the potential for the deep state to exploit religious belief and further that there's going to be a second coming, and that they are going to contrive it and use this clone Jesus to bring about some kind of future reorganization of religion or of our planet or of the United States that suits the deep state agenda. Okay, so here's another story. This is Luis Elizondo, whose book came out this week, so he's definitely been in the news. He did an interview with Joe Rogan, and in this interview he talks about a USO that he saw the video of, that was calculated by Defense Department personnel to be traveling in excess of 450 knots. So here, I'll just play this clip. It only goes for a minute.
If you can't tell us about, can you give us some sort of an understanding of like what you're talking about?
Yeah, sure.
Without being specific?
Yeah, let me see. Okay, yeah. There is a video, high-resolution video, of, I can't say what platform it was taken from. I can't say where it was taken from.
Okay.
But an object that, do you know how large an offshore oil derrick is? They're huge, right?
Yeah.
They're like almost like a small city, right? They're like one city block. They're huge. They're enormous things. There is a video that shows one of these objects underwater that goes by, the speed was calculated between 450 and 550 knots underwater, and it was bigger than the offshore derrick that it was passing, because you could see in the video the offshore derrick, and you could see this thing zip right by it.
Jesus.
Yeah.
All right, so right there you have this USO, unidentified submersible object. Now they call it a UAP, but it travels under the water in excess of 450 knots, and it's as big as an oil rig or an oil derrick. So, I mean, this is just, to me, more corroboration for the people who have been coming forward over the years, over the decades, talking about underwater cities and bases possessing advanced technologies capable of traveling at such speeds. Now, I mentioned earlier JP, who has been taken on many covert missions, and one of these missions involved him traveling on a submarine that could perform these kinds of maneuvers, and it went to an underwater city somewhere in the Bermuda Triangle area. And it's also capable of traveling into space. So there's underwater civilizations all over our planet. There's videos of some of these USOs. So this is, again, just one of those topics that is very real and is slowly coming out as more and more disclosure is happening. So Luis Elizondo is playing a role in introducing this as I said, to a kind of a more conventional political constituency, a more conventional professional audience that are looking for answers to the UAP phenomenon. So I think this is all part of the disclosure process. So those are the stories this week for Exopolitics Today, the week in review. I hope you've enjoyed that roundup. Again, I'll be back next week with more news. So until then, just take a look at what's happening around you. Disclosure is slowly unfolding. Things are accelerating, and I hope to be able to bring you more news about this next week. So see you next week, and thank you to all of those that have registered for my Patreon channel. Very much appreciated. Thank you and aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.